I told you that we will start looking with this curve basically, and we have taken out the demand because our focus was not the production side of the production side of the company, but the labor market basically. And we have marginal labor cost, and we have supply. I mean, the labor supply is also same for the market and the company. Um, well, in this case, as we have talked before, marginal revenue product and marginal labor cost, the intersection of these two lines, show you the optimum production point. And W is basically the represents the revenue that is brought by the last worker. WM represents the wage that is paid for the worker. LM represents the number of workers that are hired. We have looked to the number of shoes produced in our Excel analysis, but since each shoe represents a single worker, I mean, we can easily replace it with the labor supply, labor quantity of labor hired might be on x-axis instead of quantity of shoes produced, and this would be the case even if the labor productivity would be varying, and basically one shoe produced by multiple workers, or each worker produced multiple shoes, because for any quantity of shoes we can basically state how many workers are needed. And as we have told before, since the marginal revenue of workers is in this case higher than the wage, the marginal revenue brought by the workers is higher than the wage that is paid for the worker. And because of this, basically you have a difference between the marginal revenue brought and the wage paid to the last worker, or the workers in general. This means basically you have an exploitation. Well, I mean exploitation in neoclassical sense, because basically the productivity of workers should be measured according to marginal analysis by the marginal productivity of the last worker, which is when we look to its value W, and basically the and that value, when we won't have an explanation if that value is equal to wage, and well, since in this case that value is higher, we have a case of exploitation. Why do we have a case of exploitation? Because now when calculating when the company is calculating the cost of labor process, it doesn't take the wage as the only labor cost. I mean, the wage you pay on average is not your only labor cost, because since by decreasing number of workers you hire, you are able to decrease that wage. That means, I mean, the wage you pay to the last worker plus the wage increase you should do to the all other workers you had before are your marginal cost. So the analysis will be practically the same if you don't have a monopoly. The company was not a monopoly in the product market. In that case, basically, this marginal revenue product curve will be a horizontal line. However, the horizontal line because basically, the marginal productivity of the workers is the same. If marginal productivity of workers change, in that case, this marginal revenue product curve could be again a line like this. But even if we have a marginal revenue product curve as a horizontal line, in that case, basically, the point at which it intersects with marginal labor cost curve will be not the point at which wage is equal to the marginal revenue brought by the workers. Well, Uh, the C point on this curve has a special importance because we know, according to the margin analysis, in case of a competitive labor market, the wage converge to the marginal revenue brought by the workers. And in this case, well, wage will be, well, the labor supply for each different wage level is represented by the supply curve. And which means actually if you hire this amount of worker, you need to pay this amount of wage. Well, when you have supply curve like this, and basically and a overall marginal revenue product curve in the market like this, that means actually the revenue each the last worker bring for each different labor quantity. The labor quantity at which marginal revenue the last worker brings is equal to the wage you need to pay for the last worker to get that amount of labor supply is the point C, represented by the point C. So at point C, you got LC amount of workers, and for LC amount of workers, the wage you need to pay is equal to the margin revenue product the last worker brings. So you had a competitive market, and for the competitive market, somehow the collective margin revenue product is decreasing like this for all companies that are independent from each other. And for a single company, basically, the wage doesn't change when they hire more workers. So from their perspective, they can hire as many workers they can, even though collectively they had power to decrease the wage by hiring collectively less workers. If they don't use that collective power because maybe they are not able to act collectively, in that case, in the end, our market will converge to the point C. Well, supply curve for a single company, the labor supply curve will look like this basically. Of course, the labor amount they will hire will be less. For example, it might be LC over 100 if you have 100 companies. So that means actually by having a monopsony instead of a competitive market, the decrease in wage level is WC minus WM. And basically, well, sometimes WC over WM is taken as it can be, some economists argue that it can be taken also as an exploitation rate because the competition is having a monopsony market is actually making workers lose that amount. Although, of course, I mean, when we are looking to the conventional margin analysis, it's not important, I mean, what amount is equal to the amount of money workers lose because of the competitive market. Basically, when we calculate the exploitation, basically what we just need to look is the labor productivity, which according to marginal analysis, the important variable we should look is the marginal productivity, because that's the productivity of the last worker is important. And when we look to that, then the exploitation is W minus WM. So we can simply take basically according to the neoclassical definition, W minus WM is the exploitation in neoclassical sense, by the way, and WC minus WM is the amount of money the workers lose as a result of monopsony. Now, let's start to look basically how we can bring minimum wage into this question. So, as I have told you, the MLC curve represents the labor cost in case of a monopsony. But what will happen if state enforces a minimum wage law? Let's assume we have a minimum wage at WU. When you have minimum wage at WU, now MLC curve doesn't anymore represent the labor cost. Labor cost is horizontal from the starting point all the way to the point D. Why? Because initially, when you hire one worker, you need to pay a wage which is almost equal to zero according to the supply line. But now your minimum wage law enforces you to pay WU to the first worker, even though that first worker is willing to work for a smaller wage. So you all the way to the point D, even though to hire workers less than L dot U, you need to pay less amount of wage to them. They are willing to pay for a smaller amount of wage. You have to pay WU, which means cost of hiring one worker now for you is always WU. Well, do we need to basically raise the wages of remaining workers when we hire one more worker? We don't need to do that all the way to the point D. Why? Because basically, previously WM was the wage we needed to pay to attract LM number of workers, and in order to get one more worker, we need to pay more wage to that new worker, and since we pay the same wage to all workers, we needed to raise wage to wage of all of our labor force. Now, basically, we could when we are at LM, for example, we could attract one more worker with less amount of wage, but we have to pay to this new worker the WU because we are forced to do that. And when we hire one less worker, since we also still need to pay WU to all of our labor force, adding this additional labor worker doesn't basically cost us. It doesn't basically cost us a raise of all of our remaining labor force. So minimum wage basically stripped from us the ability to hire less workers for a smaller wage when we are monopsony. And when we are stripped from this ability, basically, this ability basically increases us hiring one more worker, basically, after a certain point in after a certain point of employment. Why? Because this ability means that hiring one more worker basically makes us give up the possibility of paying less to the remaining our already hired labor force. But now, since we already are not able to pay less to the workers we hire when we hire a small number of workers, basically this additional cost doesn't exist. Well, the fact that this additional cost doesn't exist means, of course, when you hire the first worker, for example, your labor costs are much more higher in this case. But when you were acting as a monopsony, basically you need to raise the wage of everyone when you hire more workers. After a certain point, since you have already need to raise the wage of your workers to a fixed point, hiring one more worker will be less costly when you have a minimum wage. All the way up to the point D. At the point D, things will change, basically.